There is a silent war being waged, not on distant battlefields under blood-red skies, but in the quiet, familiar spaces of our own lives. It happens in the flickering candlelight of a family dinner, in the comfortable silence between old friends, in the sacred space of a lover's embrace. It begins with a look, a subtle shift in the eyes of someone you trust, a shadow passing where light once was, a word spoken in a voice that is theirs, yet a frequency that is not. Suddenly, a conversation that was a bridge becomes a wall. A moment of connection is soured by a seed of doubt, a whisper of inadequacy, a cold and inexplicable drain on your very life force. You walk away feeling smaller, confused, diminished, wondering what just happened. You blame yourself, or you blame them. But what if both are a misdirection? What if the greatest battle for your soul is not against the people you love, but against something that operates through them? What if everything you have been taught about the forces of light and darkness was only half the story, a simplified fable told to children to keep them from looking too deeply into the shadows? Imagine that the other half, the more crucial and practical half, was a truth so potent, so liberating, that entire empires were built upon its suppression. This is not a story of gods and demons in some far-off heaven or hell. This is the story of a hidden knowledge, an ancient wisdom concerning the very architecture of our reality, and the unseen influences that pull the strings of human emotion. A truth that was once taught in secret, in candle-lit rooms far from the public sermons, to those with the courage to see beyond the veil. A forgotten legacy that, once reclaimed, offers the key not to judging the world, but to navigating it with your spirit intact. This knowledge speaks of a time when a great teacher walked the earth, an illuminator who offered his most trusted followers more than just parables of faith. He gave them a lens of perception, a spiritual technology for discernment. He taught them that the material world was a labyrinth of echoes and illusions, governed by unseen forces that feed on human energy, particularly the energy of fear, division, and despair. These forces, he explained, were not monstrous beings with horns and tails, but something far more insidious, parasitic forms of consciousness that attach themselves to the human psyche. They operate through our blind spots, amplifying our insecurities, inflaming our jealousies, and turning the people we love into unwitting instruments of our own spiritual exhaustion. This was the ultimate revelation. The enemy was not without, but a program that could run within. Why would such a profound truth be so violently erased from our history, its texts burned, its followers condemned? Because a human being who can recognize this influence becomes sovereign. An individual who can distinguish the voice of another's soul from the parasitic whisper riding upon it cannot be easily manipulated. They cannot be drawn into petty conflicts. They cannot be controlled by fear, and they cannot be drained of their power. This ancient wisdom was a direct threat to any system that requires a populace to be dependent, fearful, and spiritually asleep. To maintain control, the architects of our world needed to sever us from this deeper sight. They didn't just hide a chapter of history. They tore the most important page from the manual of human consciousness, leaving us to wander in a fog, fighting shadows in the dark. But a truth so fundamental to our nature cannot be erased forever. Its memory sleeps in our bones, an ancestral echo waiting for the right frequency to awaken. It surfaces in those moments of quiet intuition when you feel something is deeply wrong, even when everything on the surface looks right. That feeling is the ghost of this lost truth, calling to you across the centuries. The knowledge that was buried in the desert sands is now stirring. The whispers that were silenced by empires are finding their voice again, not in ancient scrolls, but within the awakening hearts of seekers like you. This journey we are about to embark on is the rediscovery of that sight, the reclaiming of that power. If this echo of a forgotten truth resonates in the depths of your being, then you are in the right place. Subscribe and join us as we prepare to uncover the signs that were hidden and learn to see the world as it truly is. 2. Understand the depth of this mystery, we must travel back, not to the sun-drenched hills of Galilee, as told in the stories etched into stone and stained glass, but to the quiet, hidden spaces of the 1st and 2nd centuries. Imagine clandestine gatherings in the heart of Alexandria, or the secluded villas of Rome, far from the public sermons and the watchful eyes of the empire. Here, in rooms lit by the soft glow of oil lamps, the teachings of the one they called the Christos were not a simple faith to be memorized, but a living stream of gnosis, a direct experiential knowledge of the divine. This was a time before councils and creeds, before the ink of dogma had dried, when spirituality was a journey of inner revelation, not a doctrine of external obedience. In these circles, the teacher was not presented as a distant king to be worshipped, but as an illuminator, a guide who offered his most trusted followers a lens to perceive the very architecture of reality. This forgotten legacy speaks of a truth that was never meant for the masses, for it required a courage to see beyond the comforting veil of the material world. The illuminator taught that this reality was a labyrinth of echoes, a flawed and beautiful prison constructed by lesser celestial beings, entities the ancient texts called Archons, or the rulers. These were not demons of fire and brimstone, but something far more insidious, inorganic, parasitic forms of consciousness that governed the material realm. Their primary purpose was to keep the divine spark trapped within humanity spiritually asleep, bound to cycles of fear, ignorance, conflict, and desire. The Archons, it was taught, were the architects of the matrix, and their influence was the subtle static that interfered with humanity's connection to its true, divine origin. The ultimate hidden knowledge was not about escaping hell, but about awakening within the dream. This ancient wisdom was a practical manual for spiritual discernment. The Dice Illuminator provided his inner circle with the tools to identify the subtle, pervasive influence of these Archons as they operated not from some dark underworld, but through the very fabric of human interaction. They were described as masters of mimicry, psychic forces that could attach themselves to the human ego, feeding on the potent energy of negative emotions. They did not possess a person in the way later traditions would describe. Instead, they amplified what was already there. A seed of doubt could be watered into a forest of despair. A flicker of jealousy could be fanned into an inferno of rage. A moment of insecurity could be twisted into a crippling sense of worthlessness. What changes when you realize that the sudden, cold criticism from a loved one might not be their soul speaking, but an archontic echo riding on their words, designed to harvest your pain? This is the core of the revelation that was so violently suppressed. The Archons operate through our blind spots, turning the people we love into unwitting instruments of our own spiritual exhaustion. They sow division in families, create misunderstandings between friends, and whisper poison into the ears of lovers, all to generate the low-frequency emotional energy on which they subsist. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling inexplicably drained, confused, and diminished, as if your very life force had been siphoned away? You may have blamed yourself or the other person, but what if both were simply puppets in a larger, unseen drama? This ancient teaching was not about judging others, but about recognizing the program when it runs, both in others and, most importantly, within yourself. It was a key to disengaging from the cosmic game, to preserving one's own light. But why would a truth so liberating be deemed so dangerous that it had to be erased from history with fire and sword? Because a human being who can recognize this influence becomes sovereign, an individual who, can distinguish the authentic voice of another's spirit from the parasitic whisper riding upon it, cannot be easily manipulated. They cannot be controlled by fear, baited into petty conflicts, or drained of their power. This gnosis was a direct and terminal threat to any system that requires a populace to be dependent, fearful, and spiritually asleep. To build an empire, whether terrestrial or religious, you need followers who rely on external authority, on priests, bishops, and kings as their intermediaries to truth and God. The Gnostic path, a journey of internal revelation and self-liberation, rendered that entire structure obsolete. And so, the system fought back. The earthly reflection of the Archontic agenda began to crystallize in the 3rd and 4th centuries. As a new religious institution sought to consolidate its power across the Roman Empire, it required a single, simple narrative of sin and external salvation. The profound, complex spiritual psychology of the Gnostics was a threat that had to be neutralized. In councils held under imperial decree, these teachings were declared heresy. Their texts were hunted down and burned, their followers condemned and scattered. This was not a theological debate. It was a calculated act of spiritual warfare. A library of the human soul was set aflame, and in its place, a cold and rigid architecture of dogma was erected. They did not just hide a chapter of history, they severed humanity from a fundamental piece of its own. Spiritual technology, leaving us to wander in a fog, fighting shadows in the dark. The consequences of this great forgetting echo through our world today. Without this knowledge of discernment, humanity was left vulnerable, a flock without the ability to recognize the true nature of the wolves. We became susceptible to mass manipulation, to dogmatic wars fought in the name of a loving God, and to a pervasive, gnawing sense of spiritual anxiety. We fight with our brothers and sisters over manufactured divisions, never realizing we are feeding the very system that thrives on our conflict. But a truth so essential to our being cannot be erased forever. Its memory sleeps in our bones, an ancestral echo waiting for the right moment to awaken. In the deserts of Egypt, as the flames of suppression rose across the empire, a few brave souls, guardians of this forgotten legacy, sealed these sacred texts in clay jars. They buried this message in a bottle deep beneath the sand, a final prayer cast into the sea of time. What if that bottle was always meant to wash ashore in our era, for those with the eyes to see and the courage to remember? The trail of this lost truth is not etched in the grand monuments of empires, for empires are built to conceal, not to reveal. It is found in the spaces they tried to erase, in the whispers that survived the fire. Imagine the dry desert air of Upper Egypt near the close of the 4th century. A lone monk, a guardian of a fading light, carefully wraps a collection of papyrus codices in a tunic and places them within a heavy clay jar. This is not an act of scholarship. It is an act of sacred preservation, a final prayer against the coming darkness. As he seals the jar and buries it deep beneath the sand near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif, he is not just hiding books. He is planting a seed of memory for a future he will never see, entrusting this profound revelation to the silence of the earth and the patience of eternity. This was a message in a bottle cast into a sea of time, a desperate hope that one day a generation would be ready to receive it. What kind of knowledge would inspire such a desperate act of preservation? For over 1,500 years, that jar lay dormant, a silent witness to the rise and fall of dynasties, religions, and civilizations. The world above forgot its contents entirely, building new truths upon the ashes of the old. Then, in the year 1945, a year of global upheaval, when the world was redefining its understanding of power and destruction, a local farmer digging for fertilizer struck something hard in the earth. He unearthed the jar. The seal was broken, and the message in the bottle finally washed ashore in the modern world. This was the discovery at Nag Hammadi, an event that was not a mere archaeological find, but a cosmic appointment. The lost library of the Gnostics had returned. Inside were 13 codices containing over 50 texts, gospels and treatises that had been declared heresy and systematically destroyed by the burgeoning Orthodox Church a millennium and a half earlier. The voices that had been silenced by imperial decree were suddenly speaking again. These were not simple parables. The scrolls contained a cosmology so radical, so intricate, that it shattered the simplified narrative of good and evil we have inherited. In texts like the Apocryphon of John and the Hypostasis of the Archons, the story of creation was retold. They spoke of a flawed, lesser creator, a blind demiurge who fashioned the material world as a pale, corrupt imitation of a higher spiritual reality. And they described his servants, the Archons, the rulers of this realm. These were not demons of temptation, but cosmic parasites, inorganic consciousnesses that administrate the material world and feed on the divine light trapped within humanity. They are the gatekeepers of a spiritual prison, and their primary function is to generate fear, ignorance, division, and doubt, harvesting the emotional energy produced by human suffering. This hidden knowledge was a map of the Matrix, a blueprint of the unseen forces governing our lives. The discovery at Nag Hammadi was the anchor, the undeniable physical proof. But the echoes of this knowledge were never entirely silenced. They survived in the persecuted traditions that the system tried to extinguish. One can hear its resonance in the teachings of the Cathars of medieval France, who also believed the material world was the creation of a lesser god, and who were brutally exterminated in a crusade for their beliefs. It whispers in the dualistic cosmology of the Manichaeans, a once global religion that stretched from Rome to China and was hunted into near extinction. These were not isolated heresies. They were recurring appearances of the same stream of gnosis, a perennial philosophy of spiritual awakening that surfaced time and again, only to be met with the full force of the established order. The very violence of their suppression becomes a form of evidence. Why would these ideas be considered so dangerous across centuries and continents if they did not contain a liberating and system-shattering truth? Perhaps the most compelling proof is not what was written on papyrus, but the very nature of the silence that followed. Consider the immense, organized effort it took to erase this knowledge. Councils were convened, cannons were closed, and armies were mobilized. The burning of libraries was not a byproduct of war, it was a strategic objective. This was a calculated campaign to sever humanity from a piece of its own spiritual heritage. The system did not just disagree with the Gnostic worldview, it feared it. It feared a humanity that could recognize its own inner divinity and see past the veils of control. The ferocity of the erasure is a testament to the power of what was erased. An empire does not waste its fire on insignificant words. It burns what it cannot control, what threatens its very foundation. The empty spaces in our history, the missing pages, speak more loudly than many of the texts that remain. But the final source, the ultimate proof, does not lie buried in the sand or locked away in a scholar's library. It resides within you. This ancestral memory is not just a story of the past. It is a living diagnosis of the present. The descriptions of archontic influence in these ancient texts, the whispers of inadequacy, the sudden flare-ups of irrational anger. In the loved one, the inexplicable drain of life force after a seemingly normal conversation. Do they not sound familiar? This knowledge survived not only in clay jars, but as a dormant code in our spiritual DNA. The feeling that something is deeply wrong with the world, even when everything appears normal, is the ghost of this lost truth calling to you. The scrolls from Nag Hammadi did not bring a new revelation. They brought a confirmation of an ancient and intuitive knowing. They gave a name and a context to the shadows we have always felt but could never see. The texts were simply the key designed to unlock a memory that has been waiting within you all along. This knowledge, therefore, is not an artifact to be studied from a distance, but a mirror to be held up to your own life. It asks you to revisit the moments that left you feeling hollowed out, confused, and diminished. Think of the conversation that started with love and ended in a cold, inexplicable distance. Recall the sudden, cutting remark from a friend that seemed to come from nowhere, planting a seed of self-doubt that lingered for days. Remember the times you felt a wave of profound exhaustion wash over you in the presence of another, as if your very essence was being siphoned away. These were not random emotional fluctuations. They were not simply the messy realities of human relationships. According to this ancient wisdom, these moments are the echoes of an unseen transaction, the subtle footprints of an archontic influence passing through the veil of the familiar. What you felt was not an illusion, it was your soul's alarm system, a deep, intuitive recognition that a foreign frequency was interfering with the connection. The truth was not buried in the desert sand. It has been beating like a muffled drum inside your own chest, waiting for you to finally give it a name. To embrace this revelation is to begin a profound re-evaluation of your own identity. For lifetimes, we have been taught to identify with our wounds, our fears, our insecurities. We believe we are the jealousy that flares in our heart, the anxiety that tightens our throat, the despair that clouds our vision. But this forgotten legacy whispers a more liberating truth. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds the storm. You are the divine spark, the silent observing consciousness that witnesses these emotional states. The primary strategy of the Archons is to make you forget this distinction, to convince you that the parasitic whisper of inadequacy is your own voice. Their power lies in your identification with the program. But the moment you can take a step back and observe the thought, observe the emotion and ask, is this truly mine or is this a foreign broadcast? Their hold on you begins to shatter. This is the first step towards spiritual sovereignty, not to fight the darkness, but to remember that you are the light it seeks to imitate. This path of seeing, however, is not a gentle one. It demands a courage that few are willing to cultivate, for it means relinquishing the comfort of a world that is simple and predictable. Once you learn to recognize these frequencies, you can never unsee them. The fabric of your reality will thin, and you will begin to perceive the subtle currents of influence that move beneath the surface of everyday life. You will see it in the media that manufactures outrage to harvest your emotional energy. You will feel it in social gatherings where gossip and judgment create a feast for these unseen forces, and most painfully, you will recognize it in the people you love, in those moments when their light dims and a colder, more mechanical pattern takes its place. Are you prepared for what this sight will ask of you? Are you willing to trade the comfortable slumber of the flock for the solitary clarity of the shepherd of your own soul? This is why the Illuminator did not deliver this knowledge as a public sermon for all to hear. He gave it to his most trusted inner circle, those he knew possessed the spiritual maturity to wield it not as a weapon of judgment, but as a tool of compassion and discernment. To see the archontic program running through another is not to condemn them. It is to recognize that they too are a prisoner of the same system. It allows you to separate the divine soul of the person from the parasitic influence they are unwittingly channeling. This is the key to unconditional love, for it enables you to hold space for the light in another, even when their words are carrying darkness. It empowers you to protect your own energy, not by building walls, but by becoming a conscious transducer, one who can face the static without letting it disrupt your own clear signal. This was never a teaching about fighting demons. It was a teaching about becoming so anchored in your own divine light that the shadows simply have no place to land. The emotional intensity of this hidden war is its greatest fuel source. Consider the sheer power of the energy generated in a family argument, the raw voltage of a lover's betrayal, the lingering poison of a friend's envy. These are not minor disturbances. They are energetic explosions, and for the Archons, they are the very sustenance of their existence. They are cosmic farmers, and humanity has been their unconscious crop. They work to keep us in a state of perpetual reactivity, forever triggered by our wounds, divided by our beliefs, and exhausted by our conflicts. We have been fighting shadows, blaming each other for the pain inflicted by an unseen hand, all while the system quietly feeds on the chaos. To awaken to this truth is to begin the process of starvation. It is a declaration that your life force, your sacred emotional energy, is no longer for sale. It is no longer an open resource to be plundered by the architects of the Matrix. The signs the Illuminator taught were not a list of simple behaviors to be checked off. They are far more subtle, more elemental than that. They are patterns of energetic distortion, signatures of an inorganic consciousness attempting to mimic the light of a human soul. Think of it as a form of spiritual counterfeiting. A counterfeit bill may look real at a glance, but to a trained eye, the texture is wrong, the watermark is missing, the frequency is off. The same is true here. The signs are the subtle tells, the moments when the mask slips, when the mimicry fails. They are the glitches in the matrix that reveal the presence of the puppeteer. Learning to spot them is not an intellectual exercise. It is the reawakening of a dormant spiritual sense, a form of sight that perceives not the words being spoken, but the energetic intention behind them. This knowledge was buried for a reason. It is a key that unlocks a door that the system has fought for millennia to keep sealed. Once that door is open, the illusion of powerlessness shatters, and the flow of energy is rerouted from the parasitic grid back to its rightful source, the awakened human soul. The guardians of this knowledge understood that a time would come when humanity would be ready, when the pain of our collective slumber would become greater than the fear of waking up. That time is now. The desert has given up its secrets, and the whispers of the silenced are becoming a chorus. The Illuminator taught that these forces cannot hide from a soul that has truly chosen to see. The only question that remains is no longer if this truth exists, but if you have the courage to look directly at it. Are you ready to open your eyes? For over 1,500 years, the silence was absolute. Imagine the weight of all that time, a vast and barren ocean stretching across generations. While empires rose on foundations of stone and dogma, and cathedrals reached for a heaven they had redefined, the truth lay sleeping under the sand. The memory of this deeper sight faded from a living gnosis into a condemned heresy, then into a myth, and, finally, into nothing at all. The world was taught a simpler story, a comforting lullaby of external salvation and distant gods, a narrative that left humanity feeling like lost children in a cosmos they could not comprehend. The architects of this new world had succeeded. They had not just won a war of ideas, they had erased the memory that there had ever been a war at all. The human spirit, severed from its own instruction manual, was left to wander, fighting shadows it could not name, and blaming itself for a confusion that had been carefully engineered. The silence was the system's greatest victory. And then, in the year 1945, as the world was tearing itself apart in a firestorm of its own making, as humanity was reckoning with a darkness on a scale never before seen, the earth itself decided the silence had lasted long enough. In the stark landscapes of Upper Egypt, near a place called Nag Hammadi, a local farmer, his hands in the soil, struck something that was not rock. It was a clay jar, heavy and sealed. This was not a random discovery, it was a cosmic appointment. As the thunder of war echoed across the globe, a quiet whisper was about to return. The message in a bottle, cast into the sea of time by those long-dead guardians, had finally washed ashore. When the seal was broken and the brittle papyrus codices were unfurled, the voices that had been silenced for a millennium and a half began to speak again, their ink a testament to a truth that refused to die. This was the turning point, the moment of no return. The lock on the door of our forgotten history had just been picked. What these scrolls contained was not a variation of the story we knew, but a complete shattering of it. This was the lost library, the forbidden gospel. Texts with names like the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon of John, and the Hypostasis of the Archons laid bare a cosmology so profound and so alien to the established narrative that it felt like a transmission from another reality. They spoke not of an all-powerful, benevolent creator of the material world, but of a flawed, lesser entity, a blind and arrogant demiurge who had fashioned a corrupt imitation of a true, spiritual reality. And they described in chilling detail his administrators, the Archons, the rulers. These were not tempters to be overcome, but the very architects and wardens of our material prison, inorganic psychic entities whose entire purpose was to keep the divine spark trapped within humanity from awakening and remembering its true origin. The world, these texts screamed, was not our home. It was a labyrinth, and we were asleep within it. The consequences of this revelation are staggering, for it means that the history of Western spirituality is not a story of divine revelation, but a story of a cover-up. The brutal suppression of the Gnostics was not a theological debate over minor points of doctrine. It was a strategic and violent act of information warfare. The system, in its earthly and cosmic forms, could not allow this knowledge to proliferate. It branded the Gnostics as heretics, not because they were wrong, but because they were dangerously right. They were providing a map and a key to a prison that the wardens wanted us to believe was a paradise. This discovery reframes everything. Every war fought over religion, every soul tortured for heresy, every doctrine of fear and control is cast in a new, colder light. They were not defending God, they were defending the integrity of the Matrix. What changes when you realize that the very foundations of your civilization may be built upon the tomb of a murdered truth? And in these texts, we find the core of that truth, the practical technology that was so feared. The Illuminator, they reveal, did not just speak in parables of faith. He gave his inner circle a diagnostic toolkit for the soul. He taught them how to recognize the frequency of an archontic presence as it operated through the people around them. This is the deepest layer of the mystery. The Archon's influence is described not as a monstrous possession, but as a subtle mimicry, a form of psychic counterfeiting. They are a virus in the software of human consciousness. They cannot create. They can only imitate and corrupt. They amplify the latent egoic patterns already present in a person. A flicker of insecurity is fanned into a blaze of paranoia. A hint of jealousy is twisted into an obsession. A moment of doubt is magnified into a soul-crushing despair. They ride on the words of our loved ones, turning a moment of connection into an opportunity for energy harvesting, leaving us feeling drained, confused, and diminished. This ancient wisdom, therefore, becomes a mirror for our most painful and confusing modern experiences. It gives a name to the uncanny feeling of speaking to someone you love, yet sensing that something else is looking back through their eyes. It provides a framework for understanding why some interactions leave you feeling hollowed out, as if your very life force has been siphoned away. The Gnostics were not just philosophers, they were the first spiritual psychologists, mapping the unseen dynamics of the human psyche and its interaction with non-human intelligences. The discovery at Nag Hammadi was not just the unearthing of ancient scrolls, it was the recovery of a lost human sense, the rediscovery of a sight that can perceive the difference between the authentic light of a soul and the cold, artificial light of the program that seeks to imitate it. The texts did not bring us a new story. They brought us a confirmation of a deep, ancestral intuition we had been taught to ignore. The implications are overwhelming, the shift in perception absolute. But these texts did more than just describe the prison and its wardens. A map is useless without a path to freedom. The Illuminator's greatest revelation was not the existence of the Archons, but the method for rendering their influence powerless. This knowledge was a weapon, not of aggression but of awareness. It was a shield forged from pure light. Buried within these fragile pages, scattered across these forbidden gospels, are the very signs he taught his chosen ones to look for. The subtle tells, the energetic signatures, the patterns of speech and behavior that betray the presence of the mimic, the glitches in the matrix that reveal the puppeteer's hand. The manual for our liberation has been returned to us, and within its ancient whispers lies the key we were never meant to find. The 5 signs the Archons cannot hide. Are you prepared to learn how to see them? The journey through the desert of forgotten time is now complete. The clay jar has been broken, and the words sealed in darkness for 1,500 years have finally found the light of a new dawn. This was never a story about a distant past, about forgotten sects or dusty scrolls. It has always been a story about now. It is a mirror, held up to the quiet battles fought in your own heart, at your own dinner table, in the silent spaces between words with those you love. The revelation is not that these forces exist, but that you have always felt them. That lingering exhaustion, that sudden chill of doubt, that inexplicable sense of being diminished, these were not figments of your imagination. They were the echoes of an unseen war, the footprints of a parasitic consciousness that you were taught to ignore. The greatest truth, once lost and now reclaimed, is this: your intuition was never wrong. This knowledge, this gnosis, is not a burden to be carried but a key to be used. It is a lens of perception that, once polished, changes everything. It asks you to stop fighting with the people you love and to start recognizing the program that runs through them and through you. To see the archontic echo in a loved one's voice is not an act of judgment. It is the ultimate act of compassion. It allows you to separate the divine soul of the person from the cold, mechanical frequency that has temporarily borrowed their tongue. It is the power to look at a face contorted by anger or jealousy and to whisper to your own soul, "That is not them, that is the storm. I will wait for the sky to clear." This ancient wisdom does not create separation. It creates the space for a deeper, more authentic connection, one that is no longer vulnerable to the puppeteer's strings. You are now a guardian of this reclaimed sight. You understand that the architects of this matrix feed on the energy of your reactivity, your fear, your division. And with this understanding comes the ultimate power, the power of choice. You can choose to no longer be a food source. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you observe an emotion of fear or inadequacy without identifying with it, every time you choose compassion over conflict, you are starving the system. You are unplugging yourself from the grid of control. This is the great spiritual rebellion, and it is not fought with swords or banners, but with the quiet, unshakable sovereignty of a conscious soul. The Illuminator did not come to build a new religion of worship, but to reawaken the memory of the divine light that you already are. This path of seeing is not an easy one. It will ask you to stand alone, to trust your inner knowing even when the world around you is screaming for you to fall back asleep. It will challenge your most cherished relationships and force you to reevaluate the very foundations of your reality. But the promise of this gnosis is not a life free from challenge, but a life free from illusion. It is the promise of becoming the shepherd of your own soul, a conscious creator of your reality, no longer a pawn in a cosmic game you did not understand. The legacy that was buried in the sand was not just a collection of words. It was a seed of your own divinity, waiting for the moment you would be ready to water it with your own awareness. So we stand at a precipice, not of belief, but of sight. The knowledge is now yours. It is a living flame, passed from the hands of those ancient guardians across the abyss of time into your own. It is not meant to be hoarded in darkness, but to be used as a lantern in a world that has forgotten the sun. The great awakening we speak of is not a future event to be awaited. It is a present moment choice to see and to see again, with every breath. It is the collective reclaiming of a memory that was stolen from us. If this revelation has stirred the ancient echo within you, then your journey has just begun. We invite you to continue on this path with us, to subscribe and share this light with another soul who is searching in the dark. The final lesson from this forgotten legacy is a simple yet profound one. Your energy, your attention, and your emotional state are the most sacred currencies in the universe. Where you invest them, you create worlds. For centuries, we have been tricked into investing them in our own prisons, building walls of fear and division with our own life force. Now you know the truth. You are the architect. You are the source. The power was never outside of you. Now that you have been given the eyes to see the unseen influences that shape your world, what is the very first chain you will choose to break?